What is going on, you guys? So today we're going to be talking about one of my personal favorite subjects, and that is what are the top 5 best languages to start programming. So this is a list that I actually compiled myself of what I think the best 5 languages are for any beginner programmer who doesn't really have any coding basis. So let's get into it. So number 5, we have C++. Now, C++ is actually a very popular language, very commonly used for GUI-based programs, and more so for also um, gaming programming as well. What I love about C++ is a very transferable syntax to other languages. So C++'s syntax, and I'll explain. So what I mean by syntax is essentially the way the language is written and the language itself and how the actual code is written. So when I say syntax is comparable to other languages, I mean that the language C++ is actually very similar in nature to Java and to C, which makes it actually very easy to transfer between the two. There are some drawbacks to using C++, however, because objectively is a little bit more difficult to learn. The language is not the most intuitive and also can be a little bit difficult to understand at first. There are less features compared to like a Python or a Java. C++ has less libraries and less things that are available for the user to use, which makes it a little bit makes some drawbacks there. And the memory management system is very difficult to debug. So what I mean by this is C++ actually allows for you to manipulate directly what memory you're allocating to, so you can directly manipulate memory within your computer. When a language has this feature, it actually makes it very, very difficult to error handle. So C++ I think is a great starter language. However, I would only really suggest C++ as your first language if you're maybe looking to start GUI programming, which is graphic user interface, or maybe even start game design or game programming. That's when I'll go into C++. At number 4, we have C. Now, C is what I like to call a low-level programming language. And what do I mean by low-level programming language? What I mean by that is C is very commonly used for chip programming, hardware programming, so very, very computer-based or low-level programming. And I think, so if you're looking into something like embedded systems or robotics, C is definitely the language for you. A great part about C as well has very transferable syntax to other languages. C very much resembles Java and very much resembles C++. So if you're willing to look to start a new language, C is a great language to learn because it really sets your fundamentals very strong. Again, some setbacks to C. Very, very difficult to debug and error handle. You get almost no information when it comes to the error that you're dealing with in C. And this can be very tough for a beginner to deal with. So this is why I'd be very weary about dealing with C. And also, because C is not what is called object-oriented programming, and I'll explain that in a bit, but because it's not object-oriented, it is very difficult to transfer C knowledge to object-oriented language such as Python, Java, and C++. So what do I mean by object-oriented? Objects are inherently a convolution of different variables and different data types in programming, and they allow you to modularize your program and make your program run more efficiently and make your program actually it's very well suited for high-level programming languages and creating more complex software. And this is why C is more well suited for low-level programming languages, because it is really difficult to build complex programs in C because it's very low level. So if you're going to go to C, make sure you understand what you're getting yourself into and you understand what the major takeaways you want from learning C. The next language I have is one that I quite frankly have quite a love-hate relationship with, and that is JavaScript. Now, JavaScript is a very, very popular web-based, is very, very popular for web programming. Now, what do I mean by this? JavaScript is, when it comes to website programming, server-side programming for websites, even most websites have some form of JavaScript. If you want to make a nice UI, if you want to make a very nice looking website, you need to have a very, very strong basis of JavaScript. And this is why I recommend that most people, if you're really looking into web programming and that's what you want to learn, definitely look into JavaScript. It has a huge community, a lot of people on Stack Overflow and all these different forums that can help you out with JavaScript, which is what I love about JavaScript. And almost every single Fortune 500 company has some form of JavaScript in their tech stack. So it's definitely transferable to the corporate world. Now, what are some cons of JavaScript? JavaScript inherently is a very, very different language from other languages. It has asynchronous programming, which I can explain in a different video, is a relatively difficult concept to grasp. But what you should know is most other programming languages function synchronously. JavaScript has asynchronous functionality. It has some intricacies that are completely unique to JavaScript, which I don't want to get into the details of, but what you should know is that JavaScript has some intricacies that you will not see in other programming languages. And it also, at times, to really, really grasp the full power of JavaScript and wield it, you really need to have a fundamental understanding of some more complicated programming concepts. So why is that number 3, even though it's a little bit more complicated? It's because it's so widely used and so well established. I think JavaScript is a great starter language if you're really into web programming, and it would really, really catapult you into the field and really, really help you understand programming substantially more if you can understand it. Number 2 is my second favorite language, quite frankly, and it is Java. Java is an absolutely great language to start with, and there's a couple reasons why. 90% of all Fortune 500 companies have some form of Java in their tech stack. So Java is very popular at some of the big FANG firms, and it is a great language to start with. It is object-oriented. It is very verbose. Everything is very well written, very well organized in Java. It's used in a lot of web apps, a lot of financial applications. It is very, very secure language. Not that you should ever be worried about your personal security when coding, but when you're looking at programming, it's more about the security of the language when you actually deploy the application. And Java is a much more secure language when compared to like a C++ or a C. And it has very transferable syntax. What do I mean by transferable syntax? Since its syntax is very similar to that of C++ and C. So learning Java, you can very easily pivot to a C or a C++ if you just learn those little differences that exist between the languages. So there are some drawbacks, as I mentioned before. There's not as many degrees of freedom, meaning that you cannot manipulate memory like C++ and in C, which actually makes Java a lot easier to error handle, which is why I love it as a beginner language, but also gives you less freedom to manipulate memory and play around with those things. So it's not very commonly used in embedded systems programs for that reason. And syntax is still very difficult to understand, and that is because Java does not very much resemble English, and it's still, for a beginner programmer who has never seen code before, Java won't make very much sense. Even if you understood programming but didn't understand the syntax, but didn't understand fundamental syntax, Java would make no sense. And that was what leads me to my next language, which is my personal favorite, and that's Python. Python is probably the most ideal beginner language for any beginner that wants to start out in programming and really get a better grasp of programming. Why do I feel that way? Well, it is quite simply because it's currently the most popular language. If you look at GitHub, which is a very common, which is actually which is a forum where people can share different pieces of code. It's an open source forum for the most part. Python is actually the most popular language on that forum, and it is used for a wide variety of applications, from web development to machine learning to artificial intelligence to game development. Python, and even to data science. Python is a very, very popular language, and I definitely think it's a great starter language because you can do so much with it as a beginner, and it can really give you all the entry points you need, regardless of what particular field of computer science you're particularly interested in. A very simple syntax, and that's one of the biggest things for me. Python is almost English. Python, if you read through the code, if you can have a fundamental understanding of programming, you can really understand Python code, and that's why I really recommend Python, and a wide array of versatile libraries. It is really nice that Python has so many different libraries that you can use that can really help you yield its power. You can, again, do machine learning, you can do artificial intelligence. Once you get a grasp of the simple concepts, it becomes really easy to make very powerful applications with Python. And the only con that I really have about Python is a not very transferable syntax. So because it so closely resembles English, I make these mistakes myself. I write Python syntax in Java and obviously it doesn't compile. And this is because Python syntax is very different from Java, C++, C, and JavaScript. And to go and pivot to those languages will require you to learn that syntax and really dive in a little bit more, which is the only con, but I definitely think it's probably the best programming language to start with by far. And I think it's absolutely amazing. And this is what leads me to this. What do I recommend? I think if you're a beginner programmer, you should definitely look into Java or Python. Java, because it is so widely used. Python, even though it is just making its entrance to the corporate workspace, because it is so versatile and so capable of making so many really powerful applications, you're gonna have a lot of fun with it, especially as a beginner. So my personal recommendation, go to Python, start learning about Python, and you can really start making some really great applications. And that really concludes the presentation, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the presentation, be sure to subscribe, like, and comment. And yeah, till next time.